Well, it was 1969. We were living in a dormitory. My children were 7 and 3, and I had had horrendous postpartum depressions after each of them. And despite using a diaphragm, I got pregnant. And there was just, I was just not willing to go through again what I had been through and to put my family through it. When I told him I just could not continue the pregnancy, he said, well, you could go to Planned Parenthood. But he said that with his back turned to me. And turns out it was not a clinic at all. It was only an educational facility. They asked me all the same questions about why I wanted an abortion and all kinds of intrusive questions. So I went to see a minister at the Old South Church. I don't know what denomination it was. And he referred me eventually to a doctor in Montreal. There were 4 of us having abortions, and I was the first. I was hoping this guy was a doctor. There was a woman in a white dress and white shoes, and I was hoping she was a nurse. There was no anesthesia. My pregnancy was very early, which meant that it was more painful than it would have been a couple of weeks later. It was really painful, and I yelled, and he told me to keep quiet. And as soon as he had finished, I vomited up the soup I'd eaten. I did hear one of the women talk about having had an abortion before, and the doctor she named was my doctor who had delivered both my children. Imagine. Several months later, I again had a diaphragm failure and was pregnant again. But this time I thought, let's go the legal route. After all, I'm a school teacher. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I called Dr. Sewell. He was agreeable, but the routine in Massachusetts at that time was you had to have a psychiatrist's approval that you would take your life if you continued your pregnancy. So I went for that appointment, which was very humiliating. I was energized. I was pretty furious about my experience. And I sought out a doctor at the Boston Lying In Hospital who was, I think, head of OBGYN. From somewhere I had the information that he was involved with a group of professional people who were planning in Massachusetts to have a counseling service to refer women to New York City once abortion became legal there in July of 1970. At the same time the New York law became legal, was implemented, we moved to Ohio. And there I very quickly got involved in an abortion rights legalization group. There were 4 organizational members of this coalition. Planned Parenthood, of course, where we met, and that was the entity that had secured the funding. The Free Clinic, the Cleveland Women's Counseling, and the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, who was represented by an African-American Episcopal priest. So we talked to women who were desperate to have an abortion and referred them either to New York, if they could afford to go, or through this routine in Ohio. In New York, There were two very big clinics. I mean, they were seeing women from all over the country. And the one that we referred to was called Women's Services. It was started by the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which was a national, really kind of an undercover ecumenical group. We continued until the law changed until the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade. There was a heck of a party that night at our house.
I remember it.
You were scared because it was a packed house. Everybody just came. It was packed and you couldn't find your mommy. We were just in disbelief. We could not believe that abortion had just become legal. Like tomorrow it's going to be legal. And it was true that very quickly abortion clinics did spring up, and very quickly we discovered that they were not offering private counseling to every patient, which we thought was very important. And they weren't giving reduced fees to anybody. And a lot of women were seeking abortions because they couldn't afford to have a child. So we decided we had to jump into the fray and have an abortion clinic.
How is that for you now, sitting where we are in this moment in history?
How it is for me is really sad. I was so determined that my daughter should never have to go through anything like I went through. And to think that we are on the cusp of being exactly there once again is just horrifying.
So what difference did it make that there was clergy involved?
I think everyone would agree with my belief that the clergy were like the good housekeeping stamp of approval. They were the legitimizing force. It means a lot to me that Reverend Buhl is staunchly pro-choice, and I was just delighted to know that he was a board member of RCRC, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice.
Yeah.
I could not belong to a church that was not pro-choice. I would hope that there are people within the church who would form a group of pro-choice people prepared to do whatever was needed. I was just listening to a podcast, and John Lewis was talking about the struggle for voting rights. And I thought how important what he said is for reproductive rights now. That the only thing that ever did work was organizing and staying organized and being unwilling to be defeated. Do not give up. You just can't. Because the pendulum will come around again. It's bound to. Because it's right.